They said the Murphy family was blessed. Rich land, healthy sons, a farmhouse that stood for 3 generations. But when the clock struck midnight on Thomas Murphy's 21st birthday, the blessing turned into a curse. And from that night on, every Murphy boy would die before turning 22. The story begins in a quiet town in rural Pennsylvania. 1923. The Murphy family lived on the edge of Maple Hollow, surrounded by miles of fog-covered woods. Their farmhouse was old but proud, creaking floors, red brick chimney, and a family Bible older than anyone alive. Thomas Murphy was the eldest son, strong, kind, and full of life. He'd just turned 21 that evening. His mother baked his favorite pie. His father poured whiskey for the first time, saying, "You're a man now, son." The candles flickered as laughter filled the room. But outside, the wind howled like something alive. At exactly 11:47 p.m., Thomas stepped outside for air. The night was cold. The fields were empty. But he swore he heard someone whisper his name. "Thomas!" Soft, close, too close. He turned around, no one. Just the barn, the moonlight, and a feeling that something was watching him. By midnight, his parents found him face down in the mud near the old well. No wounds, no struggle. Just his eyes wide open, staring at the sky, frozen in terror. The doctor said his heart stopped suddenly. "Healthy young man, dead for no reason," the town whispered. Some said he saw a ghost. Some said the Murphy land was cursed. At the funeral, Mrs. Murphy clutched her son's cold hand and cried, "Not my boy, not my Thomas." But her husband, Edward Murphy, stood silent. He knew something. He'd heard that same story before, from his own father. A secret buried deep within the Murphy name. A story about the age of 21. That night after the funeral, Edward went to the attic. The floor groaned under his boots. He opened a locked trunk that hadn't been touched in years. Inside, an old journal wrapped in cloth. It belonged to his great-grandfather, Patrick Murphy. And on the first page were 6 words written in shaky ink. "The curse begins at 21. Edward read until dawn. The journal told of an ancestor in Ireland who made a pact for fortune during a famine, a deal sealed in blood. In exchange, every firstborn son of the Murphy line would pay the price at 21. Edward slammed the book shut. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he couldn't deny what had happened to his son. And when he looked at his 2 remaining boys, Michael and Daniel, he saw the same number waiting for them in the dark. As weeks passed, the house grew quieter. Thomas's room stayed locked. His mother stopped playing the piano, and every night Michael, the second son, heard something walking in the hallway. Slow, heavy steps that stopped right outside his door. Sometimes he heard whispering, sometimes laughter. Once he swore he heard his brother's voice say, "Don't turn 21." Michael told his father, but Edward brushed it off. "Grief plays tricks, son." But deep down he was terrified, because the journal didn't lie. And in less than a year, Michael would turn 21, too. One evening, Michael walked past the old well where Thomas had died. Something glimmered at the edge, a silver chain half buried in the mud. It was Thomas's necklace. When he picked it up, a cold wind rushed through the trees, and the whisper came again. Soon, the curse had only just begun. If you want to know what happens to Michael, how the curse spreads through the Murphy bloodline, and the terrifying truth buried beneath their land, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, because the real horror is only beginning. When Thomas Murphy died, the town called it tragedy. When Michael Murphy began hearing his dead brother's voice, they called it madness. But madness doesn't leave muddy footprints outside your bedroom door. And madness doesn't whisper your name when you're alone. It had been 11 months since Thomas's death. The farmhouse stood silent. The laughter was gone. The piano hadn't played a note since the funeral. The Murphy family was still breathing, but the house itself felt dead. Michael Murphy was turning 21 in 2 weeks. He counted the days on his wall, carving tiny marks with a knife. Each one felt like a countdown to something waiting in the dark. Every night he heard it. Footsteps in the hallway, slow, steady, right outside his door. He'd open it, nothing there. But the floorboards were cold, like someone had just been standing there. One night he decided to stay awake. A candle flickered beside his bed. The house was quiet until the clock struck 2. Then he heard it again. The steps, the whisper. Michael. The candle died without a breeze. Darkness swallowed the room. And in that darkness, he saw something, faint, pale, standing by the window. A shape, a shadow, a hand reaching toward him. He screamed. His mother rushed in, holding a lantern. The room was empty, but the floor beneath the window was wet, muddy, as if someone had walked in from the rain. Except it hadn't rained that night. Edward Murphy said nothing. He'd seen that same muddy print once before, the night Thomas died. The next morning, Michael found the old journal on the kitchen table, the one his father had locked away. Her page was open he'd never seen before, written in ink that had bled through the paper. It does not forgive the bloodline. The debt renews with every eldest's breath. Michael slammed the book shut. He didn't want to believe it, but he could feel it. The curse wasn't a story. It was alive days past. Animals began dying around the property. The family's dog was found near the barn, stiff and cold, no wounds at all. Cows refused to go near the well. And every night, that whisper grew closer. On the morning of his birthday, the sky was red. The wind didn't move the trees. Even the air felt wrong. His mother tried to smile through trembling lips. "Happy birthday, my boy," she said. Her eyes glistened. She knew this might be the last time she'd ever say it. Michael didn't eat, didn't speak. He just sat staring at the door, waiting for midnight. At 11:30, the family gathered in the living room. The clock ticked louder than usual. The fire burned low, and then the door creaked open by itself. Cold air swept in. The candles went out. Only the ticking clock remained. Michael stood. "Thomas," he whispered. A shadow stepped inside, tall, familiar, eyes hollow as graves. It was his brother. But his skin was pale as ash. His lips never moved, but his voice filled the room. "Your time has come," Mrs. Murphy screamed. Edward ran forward, but the figure vanished. Michael collapsed. His body hit the floor, lifeless, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling just like Thomas had. The clock struck midnight. 21 years, 0 days. Exactly the same as his brother. The doctor called it sudden heart failure. The town called it bad luck, but Edward Murphy knew better. He buried his second son beside the first, 2 graves, side by side, both marked age 21. That night, as he stood alone by their graves, something moved in the fog. A whisper curled around his ear. 3 words, soft, mocking, final, "One son left." What happens when the last Murphy boy turns 21? Can the family escape the curse that's haunted their bloodline for generations? Or will the darkness claim him too? Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're brave enough to continue. 2 sons gone, both dead on their 21st birthday. Now only one remained, Daniel Murphy, and his mother had made a promise. Before death reached for her last son, she'd face the curse herself. Even if it meant speaking to the dead, the Murphy farmhouse had become a tomb. 2 rooms locked forever, 2 beds untouched, 2 portraits draped in black. Daniel, the youngest, was 19, quiet, gentle. He'd stopped smiling after Michael's death. He spoke only when he had to. Every night he heard his mother whispering prayers that didn't sound like prayers anymore. Mrs. Murphy had changed. Her face was pale, her hands shaky. She no longer went to church. Instead, she spent her nights in the attic, surrounded by candles, 21 of them to be exact. When for each year her sons had lived, the town started to whisper again. They said she'd gone mad, that she was trying to bargain with something that wasn't God. They weren't entirely wrong. One night, Daniel followed her. He crept up the stairs, careful not to let the floor creak. Through the crack of the attic door, he saw her kneeling before a circle of candles. Old papers were spread out, letters, maps, and the torn pages of the family journal. She was reading aloud in a trembling voice, "By the blood that was promised, by the name that was written, release us from the debt of the firstborn." Then a gust of wind blew through the room. Every candle went out at once, and in the dark, something answered her. A whisper, deep and low, like 100 voices speaking at once. Daniel ran. He didn't look back. But when his mother came down later, her eyes were different, cold, empty, and when she looked at Daniel, he felt like she was seeing someone else. The next morning, she placed a chain around his neck, the same silver chain his brother Thomas had worn before he died. "It'll protect you," she said softly, but her hands were shaking. Daniel didn't want it. He could feel it humming, warm against his skin, alive somehow. That night, Edward Murphy went to the attic himself. He found the candles half melted, and the old journal lying open. The ink had changed. The words weren't the same anymore. A new sentence had appeared at the bottom of the page, written in red. "The mother has called. The debt will be paid." He burned the book. He didn't tell his wife. He just stood in the yard watching the smoke rise, wondering if fire could kill a curse. But by morning, the ashes were gone. And in their place, on the kitchen table, lay the same book, untouched, unburned, its cover wet as if it had been pulled from the well. Edward couldn't take it anymore. He packed bags, told his wife they were leaving. "We'll sell the land," he said. "We'll go far away," but she didn't answer. She was staring out the window toward the barn, where two shadows stood, side by side. When he turned to look, they were gone. Only the barn door swung open, creaking slowly in the wind. That night, Daniel found a small box beneath his pillow. Inside was a candle and a note in his mother's handwriting. "Light it when the clock strikes 12. It may be the only thing that keeps you safe," he didn't understand. But when midnight came, he lit the candle. Its flame flickered violently, like it was struggling against something unseen. And in that trembling light, he saw his reflection in the window, but it wasn't his reflection at all. It was Michael, smiling, whispering, "You're next." The candle went out. By dawn, Mrs. Murphy had placed 21 candles on the windowsill, each representing a year, each for a life she couldn't save. But the curse wasn't fading. It was getting stronger, and Daniel was getting closer to 21. The Murphys are running out of time, and the curse is only growing darker. The family tries to flee, but something follows them. Don't miss what happens next. Like, share, comment, and subscribe if you want to uncover the secret behind the House of 21 Candles. The Murphys thought leaving Maple Hollow would save them. They thought curses couldn't cross county lines. But curses don't live in places. They live in blood. And Daniel Murphy's blood was already marked. The Murphy farmhouse stood silent behind them. Boarded windows, locked doors. A house that once held laughter, now just a shell filled with ghosts. Edward Murphy drove the wagon down the dirt road at dawn. His wife sat beside him, clutching a Bible that looked older than sin. Daniel rode in the back, staring at the fields disappearing behind them. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. They all felt it, that strange weight in the air, like something watching them leave. For miles, no one said a word, until Daniel finally whispered, "It's still here." His mother turned. "What is?" "The whisper." He pointed toward the woods. "I heard it again. Last night. It said my name." Edward gripped the reins tighter. He didn't want to hear it, didn't want to believe it. But even he had started dreaming of the well, of voices calling from beneath the water. By nightfall, they reached a new town, small, quiet, surrounded by hills. They rented a cottage at the edge of a field. The owner, a kind widow named Mrs. Rourke, welcomed them. But when she learned their name, her smile faded. "Murphy, you say?" She hesitated. "There was a Murphy family here once. Long time ago. Didn't end well," Edward lied. "Said no relation. Paid her double. They just needed peace. That first night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The cottage walls creaked. The floor groaned. And the wind, it didn't sound like wind. It sounded like breathing. He lit one of the candles his mother had packed. The flame danced strangely, bending toward the window. He followed its pull and saw something outside. A figure still watching, pale face glowing in the moonlight. It was gone before he could blink. At breakfast, he told his parents. His mother didn't answer. She was staring at her hands. They were shaking. Edward finally spoke, voice low. "It followed us." He opened his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, Daniel's heart stopped. It was the family journal, the same one his father had burned. But the cover was wet again, dripping. "I threw it in the river," Edward whispered. "Last night." He dropped it on the table. The pages opened on their own, fluttering until one stopped in the middle. A new line had appeared, scrawled in fresh red ink. "You can leave the house." "But not the blood." Mrs. Murphy stood abruptly. Her candle bag tipped over, spilling wax and matches. She backed away from the table. Her voice cracked as she said, "It's my fault." Edward frowned. "What are you talking about?" Tears streamed down her face. "I called it. I begged it to spare him. I said I'd give anything. And it listened." Daniel felt his stomach twist. "What did you give?" She didn't answer. But outside, thunder rumbled, though the sky was clear. That night the storm came anyway. Rain pounded the roof. Lightning flashed through the windows. The family huddled together, candles burning low. At exactly midnight, every flame died at once. The door blew open, and there they were, Thomas and Michael, soaked, silent, their eyes black as coal. Mrs. Murphy screamed. Edward grabbed a rifle. Daniel couldn't move. The brothers stepped closer, whispering in unison. "He must join us." Edward fired. The gun jammed. The shadows surged forward, knocking him back. The candles reignited, but their flames burned blue. And in that light, Daniel saw his mother's face, calm, resigned. "It's me they want," she whispered. She stepped toward the figures, reaching out her hands. For a moment they hesitated. Then the wind roared, and all three vanished. The storm ended instantly. Silence filled the house. Daniel dropped to his knees. Only his father's sobs broke the quiet. By morning there was no trace of her. No footprints, no body. Just the faint smell of smoke, and 21 melted candles on the table. Daniel Murphy is the last of his line, and his 21st birthday is only days away. But with his mother gone, and the curse still alive, one final horror remains. The birthday that never ended. The truth comes calling at midnight. If you're ready to see how the Murphy curse ends, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Midnight was coming. Daniel Murphy's 21st birthday, the hour the curse always claimed its price. But this time, the house was empty. No mother to pray, no brothers to warn, just Daniel, and the whisper that said it was already too late. 3 days had passed since the storm took his mother. The cottage was silent. Edward Murphy barely spoke. He sat on the porch for hours, staring into the woods, as if expecting her to walk out at any moment. Daniel didn't sleep, didn't eat. He could feel it, something circling him. The air was colder, the shadows longer, and every night he'd wake up at exactly 2:11 a.m. That was the same minute both of his brothers had died. He tried leaving once, packed his bag and walked toward the road. But after half a mile, the path bent back toward the cottage. He walked for hours and somehow always returned to the same gate. The curse had trapped him. On the eve of his birthday, he found the family journal again. It was lying on his bed, open to a page he'd never seen. The handwriting wasn't his father's. It wasn't ancient either. It was fresh, recent, written in his mother's careful script. To save one, another must take the vow. Only blood can pay for blood. He slammed the book shut. The sound echoed too long, as if the house itself had swallowed it. He ran downstairs to find his father, but Edward was gone. The front door was open, the candle on the table still burning. Outside, rain had started again. Daniel followed muddy footprints down the hill toward the well behind the cottage. The same kind of well his brother Thomas had died beside. When he reached it, he saw his father standing at the edge, holding something in his hands, the silver chain. Edward turned slowly. His eyes were hollow, red-rimmed from tears. "It wants you," he said quietly. "It's always wanted you, but maybe it'll take me instead." Before Daniel could stop him, Edward dropped the chain into the well and whispered, "Take me." A gust of wind howled up from the darkness, and Edward was gone. No splash, no scream, just silence. Daniel fell to his knees. He shouted into the well until his voice broke. But only one sound came back, a whisper that wasn't his father's. It said, "Midnight, Daniel. Be ready. He stumbled back to the cottage. The clock read 11:47 p.m. 14 minutes left. He lit every candle in the house, 21 of them, just like his mother used to. The flames burned unevenly, bending in the same direction, toward the door. Something was coming. 55. The floorboards creaked. A chill crawled down his spine. Then came the first knock. Soft, slow, measured, 3 knocks. He didn't move. Another knock. Harder this time. The candles flickered violently, then a voice, familiar and broken. "Danny, open the door." It was his mother's voice. His heart raced. He wanted to believe. He wanted to open it. But deep down he knew. Whatever was out there wasn't her. The clock struck 12. Every candle went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Something stepped inside. Bare feet dragging across the floor. Daniel backed away. "Who's there?" he whispered. The voice came again, layered now, a chorus of whispers that sounded like every Murphy who had ever died. You can't run from blood. He saw them then, figures emerging in the faint moonlight. Thomas, Michael, his mother, even his father, all standing in a circle around him. Their faces were calm, their eyes black. Thomas stepped forward. "You were never meant to live past this night," he said softly. "But one of us can end it," Daniel trembled. "End it? How?" His mother raised her hand. In her palm, the silver chain. It glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "The curse began with blood," she whispered. "It must end with it too." She placed the chain around his neck. It burned cold, then hot, searing into his skin. Daniel screamed. The figures began to fade one by one as the fire spread across the chain. His vision blurred. The room filled with light, then silence. When he opened his eyes, the house was empty. The candles had melted to nothing. The journal lay open on the table, blank. The curse was gone, but Daniel's hair had turned white overnight. And when he looked in the mirror, his reflection smiled back at him, even though he didn't. The Murphy curse might be broken, or it might have just changed its form, because some whispers never die. They only find new names. The truth buried beneath. The real secret behind the Murphy family's deal will finally be revealed. Before you face the ending, like, share, comment, and subscribe if you're ready to uncover the truth. The curse was supposed to be over. The candles burned out. The whispers gone. But curses don't end, they hide. And the last Murphy was about to learn that some debts are paid twice. A week after his 21st birthday, Daniel Murphy buried his father's rifle behind the cottage. The town doctor said Edward drowned himself. No one spoke of the mother. No one dared to. Daniel stayed alone. No neighbors. No friends. Only silence. And the strange comfort of knowing he'd survived. Or so he thought. He tried to live normally again. Chopping wood. Feeding the horses. Writing letters to no one. But some nights, when the wind blew just right, he'd hear faint laughter near the well. Familiar laughter. The kind that sounded like his brothers used to when they played outside as kids. He told himself it was imagination, that the curse was gone, that his family had found peace, but deep down, something in him knew better. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Daniel found something wedged behind a beam, a small wooden box, old, dusty, wrapped in black cloth. Inside was a folded paper, yellow with age, sealed with dark wax. He broke the seal and began to read. It wasn't written by his father or his mother. It was dated 1821, signed by Patrick Murphy, the ancestor who started it all. To the keeper of the line, I made the pact when famine took our land. I offered the years of my sons for bread. The spirit granted life, wealth, and lineage, but cursed the blood that carried my name. Only the 7th son, born under the dying moon, can unbind it. But to do so, he must die willingly before his 22nd year. Daniel froze. He whispered to himself, 7th son? He counted. His father had been the 5th. He was the 6th. There was no 7th unless... He dropped the letter, ran outside. The wind howled like it knew his name. He sprinted toward the well, the one his father vanished into. It was open again, black water swirling below. "Show me!" he shouted. "Show me the truth." The water rippled, then stilled, and for a moment Daniel saw it. Not his reflection, but faces. his family's faces, all staring back, smiling, and in the middle, a baby crying softly. Wrapped in a white blanket marked with the Murphy crest, Daniel's heart pounded. He wasn't the last. Somewhere, somehow, another Murphy had been born, a seventh son. The final piece of the curse. He stumbled backward, gasping. The air around him shimmered. The world bent. And suddenly he wasn't standing by the well anymore. He was back inside the farmhouse. The old one in Maple Hollow, perfectly restored. The fire burning. The piano playing faintly. And sitting in the chair by the fire, his mother. She turned to him slowly. Her face was pale but calm. "You broke it once," she said softly. "But the curse doesn't die with one soul. It moves, it waits, until another Murphy is born." Daniel stepped closer. "Where is he?" Her smile faded. "In Ireland," she pointed toward the door. "You go back to where it began. Only there can it truly end." The flames behind her roared higher, swallowing the room in light. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was back by the well, soaked in sweat, gasping for breath. The letter from 1821 lay in his hand, dry and unburned. He looked up at the sky. The moon was half gone, a dying moon, and somewhere, far across the ocean, another Murphy child was crying in a cradle. Daniel whispered, "It's starting again." The wind answered with a faint, familiar voice. Thomas's voice. It never ended. The Murphy curse began in blood, and it never truly died. Somewhere, another son carries the name, and the clock is already ticking toward 21. If you believe some legacies can't be buried, like, share, comment, and subscribe, because the next story might begin with the next Murphy.